Welcome to the Fourth Row Podcast, your exclusive source for 2A basketball. And now, your hosts, coming to you from the Slim 4 studio, Andy and Benny Hill.
Welcome to the Fourth Row Podcast, the only podcast dedicated solely to 2A basketball here in the snowy state of Utah. You know, it was warm yesterday. I had like dust on my road and it felt like springtime, and now the snow's back. So, welcome to Utah. It's springtime.
It was hoodie weather at least yesterday.
Yeah, that's true. I'm your host, Andy Hill. I'm here with the coach, Benny Hill, in the newly renovated Slim 4 studio, sponsored by Security National. We'd like to thank our good friend Chris Jorgensen, as always, in the E14 office for being our title sponsor. For all your mortgage needs, give Chris a call, 283-3000, as he says, turning houses into homes. Tonight we've got a special version of the Fourth Row Podcast. We're actually going to record two of them tonight, but this is the first of two.
Yeah, we thought we would separate this one out aside of just our normal weekly basketball wrap-up. Tonight we have our good friend Shane Blackett with us tonight. He is from Nephi. He is a JUAB High School alumnus. We'll get into him a little bit, his history at JUAB High School, or his years that he was there and the things that he participated in. Shane is currently the owner and operator of WASPFIT, a strength and conditioning facility in Nephi. We have our own personal history with Shane. I'll tell you a little bit about how we met, Shane, but welcome to the studio.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
How was your drive down?
It was great.
Great and a little snowy. Just, this is how I met Shane. So I had to think back of how I even got connected with him. And that is, we were at, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we were at, I think Bones had a fifth or sixth grade game in Nephi at the elementary school. And Shane was reffing. And towards the end of the game, he came up and he said, "Hey, you're the high school coach at Gunness?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He introduced himself as Shane Blackett. He's like, "Hey, I specialize in personal training, strength and conditioning training for athletes. And I would love to come down and help you with some speed at that time, some speed and some speed training with your team." I said, "Oh, that sounds cool." So we arranged. Shane came down. We had a one-day event, I think, with whoever was there. We might have had, 20, 25, 30 kids, something like that. But what really stuck out to me was, and that was a good and fun thing. Many kids were not that interested in what was going on. But what was interesting to me was Shane then came down on an individual basis and trained Jackson.
Yeah.
And at the time, Jackson was, that would have been his his junior season. So he had he'd sat out his sophomore year with major surgeries and complications. And we had, up to that point, we had relearned how to shoot. We had relearned how to be active and to be able to play basketball again. And that's when Shane entered. And Jackson needed to get faster and quicker and more explosive. And I'm telling you, after he was done with workouts with Shane, not only was Jackson quick as a cat again, but man, his confidence, and this is the thing that was most impressive to me about Shane, was not only did he come down and help Jackson work out, but he gave him confidence to go compete again. And Jackson always made comment about that, of how helpful that was during that journey. That was the last good year he had competing in athletics, and Shane was a huge part of that. So did I get the story correct?
Yes, you did, actually. I was trying to think about that, and I remember that initial contact. But, like you said, that first experience with all the kids there, it was cool and fun. But the special part was those times that I had with Jacko. And those one-on-one times, they were special to me.
So since that time, and like I always said, Shane's had a special place in our home, and the fact that he always kept tabs on what was going on with Jackson, and he's always been very helpful. Even to this point, talking to Jet and Bones, they've been up a couple times working out with you, not as much as we'd like to. Yeah. You'd think 45 minutes is not that far away, but sometimes it gets to be a little bit of a burden. But we wanted to come you down, one, to thank you for the work and the help you did with Jackson, because I'm telling you, it was very impactful for him in his journey. And we also wanted to talk to you a little bit about how what you're doing is impacting the athletes in Nephi and also throughout the state as well. Because as you can see, I'm not an expert on the weight room. I'm not a frequent flyer there. I got my Mountain Dews. I just had my Totino's pizza.
Checking out how many calories they have.
Yeah, a lot, but it tastes really good. So we wanted to bring you down just have an open discussion about weightlifting, strength training, how that relates to individual sports, and let you tell you a little bit about your operation. So what year did you graduate from Nephi? Or excuse me, Juab High School?
06. So it's been a few years back, but yeah, I graduated 06 and spent my time. I was a 3-sport athlete there at Juab. As I was thinking about it, I played all the sports, but basketball really was what I grew up on. 2A basketball. I had the opportunity to play for Wade Jacobson, who instilled a lot of life lessons into me, not just basketball, not just running the motion offense, but instilled a lot of life lessons into me and really helped to shape me into who I am today. And that's really what sports is all about, is shaping young people.
What other sports did you participate in?
Football and baseball. And so football, I was my claim to fame is I was Coach Bowering's first quarterback at Juab. His first year there.
Oh, okay.
We played for state that first year he came, so that would have been 04, my junior year. And we had a great run there in football, and then baseball, we had a great run. Always battled it out with those Gunnison Bulldogs. But
what was your specialty in football? Were you a chucker? Were you strike me as like a dual threat guy?
A little bit. We didn't really run as much in our offense, but I would probably say I was more of a game manager. Good leader in the huddle. Didn't really put up the numbers that Alex Jackson put up this year for the Wasp, but we were very successful and had a good time there. So
awesome. I think back of my time in high school. I'm a 93 graduate, so I'm way before your era. You were just a little young scrubber watching Todd Pay, Tony Bender. Not Tony. What's
Tony Pay,
Jason Bender.
Jason Bender.
That goes way back.
The guy, Tony, the Pays could jump out of the gym.
Oh, yeah.
they were dynamic. Tony was my age, and he was a great player, too.
Yeah.
Todd was the high flyer, though.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit, and then let's jump into WASPFIT.
Yeah.
Tell us where WASPFIT came about.
Yeah, so shortly after I got home from my mission, I helped Coach Bowering. Right before I left on my mission, I helped him with the football program, and then when I came home, I was going to SUU, but I would come home in the summers. And I saw a little need there in the weight room program, and I stepped in and fulfilled that need. We would do WASPFIT on the opposite days of what they were doing with the football program, and it was more of a athletic training program, and that was kind of where it got its start. And I owe a lot to Coach Bowering for giving me that opportunity to work with kids, and that would have been in 12, I believe, 11 or 12, and that was really the time that I got. I mean, I'm the son of a coach. My mom has coached the drill team there in Juab since '89, and I was born in '87. So I mean, my whole life I've been the son of a coach. But I've always wanted to coach. I've always, I've really been involved in every aspect of sports, from refereeing to coaching to being a dad now. But I really got that opportunity to work with athletes and develop athletes, like you mentioned, not just the physical development of speed and strength, but the confidence and the mental aspects. And that's truly what I love to do. I love it. Like when you say, like, when I walked into the studio here, I could tell, like, this is a passion for you guys. This is a love for you guys. Like, it's the same way I feel about my gym. When people come in there, I love working with kids, and I love seeing progress. I love seeing them become stronger in every aspect.
Can I ask you a dumb question?
Yeah.
When you have, like, for instance, a basketball coach or a football coach, they have their individual preferences and theories. In basketball, you got motion guys or you got set play guys, how they think it should be done. in weight training and strength and conditioning, do you as a strength coach, do you develop your own theories and then execute those as opposed to just going through the playbook that everybody else goes by?
Yeah, for sure. And I would say my views on training, a big statement in strength training and athletic development is it depends.
That'll probably come up a lot in our conversation.
Yeah.
It depends.
It depends. But
because I do know I've sent you many texts and you've always said, well, that depends.
Yeah.
You have said that.
Yep. So, but no, that's a great question. Is my views and opinions have developed over time. What I knew in the beginning, when I started in 11 and 12, I look back on that and I go, wow, what was I thinking? And I've developed that, and as I've really delved into it and become a professional in this area, my views are, it does depend on each individual athlete, but I have a basis of what I like to do with every kid. Strength is not a bad thing for anybody, and strength is kind of the foundational aspect that every athlete needs, whether you're a runner or a basketball player or a football player. Strength and how you go about getting that, now that's where you can go down a few different rabbit holes. But my primary foundational belief is called the conjugate method, and we train different aspects of athleticism through, it's not just the old I like to make this,
I was a bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah, there's bigger, faster, stronger. I always like to make the joke that it's, the old Bear Bryant program that teams are still running from the 1960s.
Yeah.
Bench, squat, deadlift, that's all we're going to do. And training has evolved. And, just the idea of athletic development. We're developing athletes to be successful in their sport, not to be successful in the weight room. The weight room is secondary.
Gotcha. Tell us a little bit about, so you're in Nephi. In my opinion, Andy and I, we've talked about this before. Nephi is exploding right now in that, just from a demographic observation that they're growing, but athletically they're seeing a lot of success in their programs in it's borne out at the high school level. Football, they've won a state championship. I think, was it 2 years ago when they won football, wrestling, and basketball?
2020.
Mm-hmm. What successes are you seeing in Nephi at this point right now?
A lot of it, and a lot from my aspect of it, a lot more kids are getting active, building athleticism from a young age, so that when you're getting to that high school level, the idea of training's not new. It's not, when a few years ago, it was when freshmen would walk into the weight room, it was their first exposure to training. Now we're getting kids exposed a lot earlier and a lot sooner. But from a whole community aspect, there's a lot of people who are invested. You look at the wrestling program, there's 140 kids in our youth wrestling program. It's the second largest club in the state. We have
that is amazing.
Multiple youth baseball teams, youth basketball teams. We have the Hive now there that is drawing tournaments. And yesterday I went and watched a 6th grade girls basketball tournament at the Hive.
Tell our listeners what the Hive is.
So the Hive is it's a community / school building. Has 4 basketball courts, a full 40-yard turf field, weight room. A full-size wrestling room. When I say full-size, that's like 3 mats of wrestling mats. It's giant. But what it's going to do for our community and the surrounding communities is amazing. Like yesterday, like I said, I'm a sports junkie. I'll go watch any game, anytime. But there was a 6th grade girls basketball tournament up there, and it's drawing people in from all over. So it's not just benefiting our community, it's going to benefit everybody, to where, it used to be you'd have to travel to Provo or to Utah County to go play to these things. Now it's right here in our own backyard. So
yeah, it's pretty impressive. I know we were just talking briefly before the podcast. I give a shout out to Kel Cowan and the Cowan boys up there. I know what they do with that wrestling program, and his son Trevor he's special.
Yeah.
But I know that all this is working together. When you've got 140 kids, and I know Juab's a much bigger school and bigger community than Gunnison is, but that's next level stuff. And I know when I talk to him, I know what they're doing and their strength training and everything else. I think that's what it takes to get to the next level. And they've got kids that come in from all over who want to be a part of their club and say, hey, what's Juab Wrestling doing? I mean, these are junior high kids now. I can't wait to see what they're going to do because the high school team's already the best around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's our high school team just this past weekend at divisionals qualified all 28 kids for state. That
is impressive.
Pretty, unheard of. And a lot of that is credited to the youth program. But then when they do get to high school, Coach Holman is the best at what he does. And, that's a credit. Like, the youth programs, as I mentioned, are feeding into all this.
So at WASPFIT, get back to WASPFIT. Tell us a little bit about what are your goals and focus when some kid wants to come to your gym, or what do you like to emphasize at your gym?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not, I guess I wouldn't say traditional. I really don't care how much you bench. I don't care how much you squat. We measure a lot of different things when I train athletes. We measure squat speeds. We measure vertical jump. We measure flying 10 times. These are all aspects that I measure for athleticism. And if it can be measured, what good does it have in your program? And that's my philosophy on training. If I can't measure it and I can't quantify it, then how do I know if I'm improving the athlete? But my goal overall is to help athletes become stronger every day. And you'll hear me say that phrase over and over again. That's the title of my podcast. I say that sentence over and over and over again. And stronger every day to me is not just physical strength. It's mentality. It's attitude. It's confidence to go out and perform, confidence to do hard things in life. And stronger every day has really taken on a life of its own. The every day that I talk to athletes, I have the chance to work with athletes one-on-one, and the athletes that I work with online, it's generally it all comes back to that phrase, stronger every day. It's a mentality that you live life with.
How young do you start? How young of athletes do you take in your gym, or do you recommend strength training?
Yeah. I have a video of my oldest boy. He's 7 now, when he could barely walk, picking a kettlebell up. So, I mean, I like to say he started training when he could walk. But I have as young as kindergarten that we start working on movement and athleticism. And when people hear that or think of, oh, these kids are in here training, it's movement. And it's getting them aware with their body, body control. And then once you've established that body control and coordination, now you've got a good base to start building off of. My 7-year-old son, he's a lot more advanced than a lot of 7-year-olds probably should be in the weight room, but it's kind of, he's grown up with that.
He's seen it his whole life.
He's seen it his whole life. He's been in there. I mean, it's just like any son of a coach. You don't really have, any other way of life, And so picking up kettlebells and swinging kettlebells and doing pull-ups, and that's just kind of been something that he's always done. And for me, I always like to use the analogy for young kids when young kids start training and start moving their bodies. It's like wiring a house. When I start teaching proper movement skills and I get kids moving at a young age, that's like putting the wiring in this house. Now when they start to develop and grow and mature, that's like the sheetrock. Now when we hit puberty, we're putting on the roof and we're making this thing, we're really going from there. So, I mean, training to me starts when a kid starts crawling on the floor.
Would it be fair to say that the from the outside looking in, people just assume strength training is putting some weight on the barbell and start cranking it out?
For sure. And
this is anything at a younger age. It's pretty much anything but that.
Yep. Yes. You think of sports too. Some of the most impactful exercises that you do are sprinting and jumping. But we don't bat an eye when we throw our kids out onto the court or onto the wrestling mat. what are they doing? They're sprinting, they're jumping, they're picking up opponents, you know? And so training, when you're in a controlled environment, it's actually safer than what your sport is.
Yeah.
Sports are uncontrollable and sporadic, and but training, when you're doing it with a qualified professional, now, like, you're in a safer environment. You're setting yourself up for better success. So, but I mean, that's, again, there's a lot of myths, and kind of funny that you bring that up. The myth of stunning, that weightlifting will stunt your growth. That was actually a study performed on, and this is like going down kind of a rabbit hole, but that was a study performed on kids who worked in mines in China in the early 1900s. And they took this small little group of kids that worked in a mine who were hunched over and lifting heavy things, and that was kind of the thought was that, oh, well, because they did that, they were lifting all those heavy weights in the mine, that stunted their growth. Well, that's all been researched and debunked. So I'll share some stuff on my social about that.
I saw a tweet yesterday on social media. I'm a frequent flyer on Twitter, so you get a lot of stuff on there. And there was a tweet on there that said, "Coaches, capital, all caps, exclamation point, please stop telling your athletes not to lift on game days." Now, I would ask you this question. You'll probably say it depends, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So this is one thing. Like I said, I've at Gunnison High School or my time there, like I said, strength training was not a huge emphasis. I think it's becoming more of an emphasis at every sport, and probably at every classification now. What is that referring to? Because I see that game day lifting is, for some reason, on Twitter. I don't know if you see it now. That seems to be a big conversation now.
Yeah.
So I'm always curious as to, one, why is that an issue that's brought up on Twitter now, and good or bad?
Yeah, anything on Twitter can be polarizing. It can spark debate, and there's always going to be two sides to every story. I'm a believer in game day lifting if you do it right and if the timing is right, which I guess that would mean it depends, right?
Yes, very, very much so depends.
A lot of my athletes will lift on game days, but when I say lift, you're not putting a heavy barbell on your back or loading up the bench. You're doing exercises that are priming you for the sport. For example, we'll do a lot of they're called isometric holds, where we pull a bar into the squat rack. There's no weight on it. We pull a bar into the squat rack, but it activates the muscle. Okay, so you're activating the hamstring, and then we'll follow that up with a jump, to where I like to say we're priming the athlete for their sport. We're priming them to be explosive. Think of it as like you're putting gas in your car. And that's my view on weightlifting on game day, because I think when you hear that lifting on game day, immediately, if you don't know, you think, I'm lifting heavy weights, I'm going to wear myself out, I'm going to get myself sore. Why would you ever want to do that? My athletes don't lift heavy on game days. We don't do any heavy lifting on game day. We do a lot of activation. The fancy word for it would be potentiation. You're potentiating the muscle to perform. Football players, I like to lift with football players at, like, they play a home game at 7. They would come into my place around 3:45. We would do a potentiation lift. Think of it as like a pre-warm-up. And when they leave, they're feeling good. They're feeling confident. They're feeling juiced up. Who wouldn't want to go into a game like that, right? As opposed to, I think back to me, I would go home from school, I would take a nap. I'd walk into the locker room a little groggy, like, all right, crank up Metallica or whatever to get you going, But now it's, my views on that have all changed. It's I want to potentiate the athlete to perform when they need to perform.
I can understand that and appreciate. The reason why I bring that up and why I've had beef with is over the years, I think perhaps the qualification of those that are telling athletes to lift sometimes is not at the professional level as you're speaking of.
Yep.
So, for example, we would have kids come to practice sometimes, and they would say, "Dude, coach, my arms are dead. I can't shoot." To me, that is not lifting properly.
Yeah.
Even pre-practice or definitely not pre-game on game day. If you can't physically perform the sport based upon weightlifting prior to that day, that is obviously not a good thing.
Yeah, and to that point, in-season training, like I said earlier, the weight room is secondary. Like if you're sending athletes into practice and they can't lift their arms, we didn't accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. We didn't make the athlete better for their sport. And so really in season, my whole goal is to send you into your sport, whether that be into game or whether that be into practice later that day, feeling better, feeling more confident. Really in season is all about management, load management, and fatigue. Like I don't want to run a kid into the ground in the weight room and then they can't perform later that night. When the ball's tipped off at 7:00, they're feeling they're feeling heavy and drained. My goal is that the weight room enhances what they do. That when they step onto the floor, they're feeling springy, they're feeling poppy, they're feeling confident, and they're ready to perform.
And that's probably where my beef has come with it is from the proper angle and the proper explanation, as you're saying. If you're priming the pump basically to get revved and ready to go a couple hours later, as opposed to taking a nap and showing up groggy, I'm totally down with that.
Yeah.
Totally down with that.
Yeah, and a big part of that is blood flow. You know, when I go home and take a nap, I have no blood flow. My heart rate's low. You know, when I go and I do a potentiation workout and I get my muscles activated, now my heart rate's up, my blood's flowing. I've primed the pump. You know, now when I go into warm ups, I'm in a better mental state too.
I like the fact that you say you're in a better mental state. So if it's 3:00 or 4:00 in the afternoon, and you have a 7:00 tip off, if you're there at the gym priming the pump and just getting the blood flowing and mentally you're starting to check into the game 3 hours earlier as opposed to 15 minutes on your drive to the gym, I can see that being a very, very huge positive.
Yeah. And so I work with the Juab wrestlers, and you'll see them at all their tournaments with bands. And it's not, I mean, wrestling's a little different than basketball. Every sport is unique in that sense of timing and how you execute your training. But you'll see the Juab wrestlers going through a series of band exercises to prime the pump. You know, typically a wrestler, they're going to get there, they have to weigh in, you know, like in 10 days we have state wrestling. They'll go there, they'll weigh in, and then they'll have a few hours until they compete. Your options are you can lay around and you can be groggy and you can go back down into that tired zone, or you can potentiate your muscles. And Coach Holman has bought into that in a big way. And he's like, man, my kids love it. My kids love it because they feel juiced and they feel amped up. And I'm like, yes, yes, coach is buying into this. And the kids are too. And that's the thing. When you feel good, you perform good.
So I'll put you on the spot here. You tell me if you've thought about this, or maybe you have an answer, and maybe if you want to say, hey, let me think about that for a second. I always think, for instance, basketball. Say a varsity player. A varsity player comes to the game about JV time, sits around, watches the JV game, about third quarter, goes in and gets dressed, comes and sits on the bench. They horse around a little bit till it's time to go onto the court. They get a 12-minute warm-up, and then you're expected to go full speed. Yeah. To me, I've always thought that's not the ideal, but I don't know what else you would do besides that, but maybe you have answers as to what athletes can do in between that time of outside or before that 12-minute warm-up that they have. Mm-hmm. And also, too, at halftime. You play for, 16 minutes?
Yep.
16 minutes, then you go sit around for 10 minutes, and then you go warm up for, depends on how much time the activities at halftime take. 2 minutes maybe, and then you expect to go full speed again.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Bands are an amazing tool because bands are low load on muscle. And like I said, it keeps going back to, for athletes, you want to activate the muscles to perform. And so, in that case, a varsity basketball player going in there, that situation where you're arriving to the gym, a basketball player could go through a 15, 20-minute band workout, go through a mental. I'm very big on, and I know we'll maybe get into this later, but very big on the mental side. Go through a mental visualization workout, which takes 5-10 minutes. Now you're really, because what's the alternative? You go there, you sit in the stands.
You do nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you do nothing.
I mean, kids are on their phones or they're just sitting, I mean, I used to think that was like cool, oh, look at the varsity kids over there. They're all reclined back in the seats.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to go next, But now to me, I'm like, man, there's so many missed opportunities to prepare yourself physically and mentally that we just miss out on because we just sit around. We don't really know any better. Mm-hmm. But there's routines and things and that's what I really love to help teams and individuals do is know those, capitalize on those opportunities that you have.
And that's kind of why I wanted to get you here, is to bring out some of those things that can help our athletes and advise our coaches. There's things out there to help improve your team's performance, other than just the norm.
Yeah.
And plus the other thing too, when you're on the road, your opportunities to prime the pump are even less than what they are at home. So, we'll and when we get done with this, when we add the podcast, we'll add any kind of information or links or contacts, all that kind of stuff. But those kind of things I think would be very, very helpful for our athletes.
Yeah.
Practical things for our athletes.
Yeah. Bringing that up, on the road, it can be a little more challenging because you're away from your home comfort zone. I worked with San Juan's basketball team. We discussed that a little bit earlier, but I worked with them last year, and thanks to Coach Jimmy Johnson, he was awesome to work with, Coach Black. But their schedule was set up ideally for it. They were kind of like a college team. They travel on the weekends, and then they come home, and we could do our workouts during the week, and then on the weekends they did a lot of band work, and they did. But like you said, a lot of that is warm up and knowing the muscles to warm up, not just, you see a lot of high school teams go out there and do layup lines and
Tip the ball off the backboard.
Some 3-man weaves.
3-man weave layups, why? Because that's what
you do.
Coach Hill in the 70s did, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Coach, they don't put any time or thought or effort into it. It's just what you do.
Because it's easy.
Yeah.
And it's easy, and it's like mindless, and I don't have to think about that. And that's when I worked with San Juan last year, that was my whole goal, was like, I want to take this off your plate, coaches, and give you the framework. Boom. Go do it. When I went and watched them in the state playoffs last year, I'm like, look at them doing sprint prep. Like they're getting prep, they're getting primed, and so the proper warm-ups, and that's, I mean, that can go down a whole rabbit hole. But if you know what you're doing in your warm-up, that just sets you up for success going forward.
So in the future, coaches could contact us or contact you and say, hey, tell me what you did with San Juan.
Yeah, for sure. And I love doing that.
Because they were an impressive team.
Yeah, we really got to know them last year, and from top to bottom, from Coach Black all the way down through. There was a lot of things going on behind the scenes, as you know.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about this in a minute. But mentally, I mean, physically it was one thing, but mentally, they had a lot on their plate.
Yeah.
And so what they did was incredible.
And that's it was funny because just a couple of days ago I was talking with somebody about what was the best sporting event you've been to, and immediately I was like, San Juan's winning the state title.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's hands down the best sporting event I've been to live in maybe my life. That was special. So,
Yeah. So why don't you talk for a minute? We talked about the physical side. Talk for a minute about mental preparation, especially on the basketball side, and maybe some of the things you did with San Juan last year.
Yeah. Mentally, there's a lot of great things. I run a program called AMP, and it's athletic mental programming, athlete mental programming, and that word programming is key because athletes, especially younger athletes, are running the programs that have been instilled by coaches or parents, beliefs, different, just like the warm-ups. Mm-hmm. When we go out there and we run through the motions, a lot of the mental stuff is going through the motions. You're running mental programs that when you stop and think about it, why am I doing that? Why am I saying these things? Why am I thinking these things? I'll tell a cool story. A couple of years ago, I worked with Ty Allred.
Mm-hmm.
And
fantastic player.
Yeah, great player, but amazing leader and coachable kid. One thing that, and I've told this story on my podcast before, but Ty, when he started working with me his freshman year in high school, through these training sessions, I'd put him through, and his very first workout was just a butt kicker, and I knew it was going to kick his butt, and I just wanted to see how he would respond, and he was like, it kicked his butt. So we always had that to refer back to. Look how far you've come. Remember when you did that? Look how far you've come mentally and physically. But Ty used to always say, after every workout, that's brutal. Oh, that's brutal. And I'd be like, Ty, no, it's not. Remember what you did previously? And he was running this program of saying everything was brutal, everything was hard. And to him, everything was tough and everything was hard. We had that conversation, hey, let's eliminate that out of your vocabulary. Let's get that brutal phrase out of there. Be grateful instead. Be grateful for the opportunity you had to get stronger. Be grateful for the opportunity you had to get faster. And when he made that switch, man, it was like night and day. Everything that he did in his workouts, it was like, and he was pretty famous for patting his chest. And he was a confident kid on the court. But a lot of that came because he switched that program. Instead of being, oh, poor me, everything's brutal, everything became, man, I'm grateful for the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing. There's a few core beliefs that I have when I work with athletes, and one of those is being grateful for the opportunity to compete, being grateful for the opportunity to train, and not being afraid of failure, not being afraid of, because I believe mentally a lot of athletes hold themselves back because they don't want to fail. They don't want to look dumb. They don't want to. Mm-hmm. They don't want to put themselves out there. When in reality, they just need to embrace that. They need to lean into that. Not be afraid of it. Not be afraid to fail. Not be afraid to look silly doing it, and not be afraid of what their peers think. Because going back to that story of Ty, I think that was something that kind of held him back, was because he was wanted to be back on that this equal, when in reality he was
exceptional athlete,
and he had potential to go up, and so a lot of those little mental programs that you can find, and I've trained myself in working with mindset with athletes. I'm NLP trained, which is neuro-linguistic programming. It's a tongue twister. But a lot of that is the words that we use, the phrases we use, and the programs that we run unconsciously. And a lot of athletes are, and you can watch that. Next time you're broadcasting a game, watch body language. Watch words that they use. When body language sulks, are they thinking that consciously? Look down at my, one thing I always tell my athletes, don't ever look at your shoelaces. Because if you're looking at your shoelaces, your head down, your body language is down. Like, keep your body language up, your head up. But how many kids do that without even thinking about it?
Yeah. When I look back on coaching for 10 plus years, I would think one thing that if I had to do all over again, one thing I would do was spend a lot more time connecting with athletes on a mental level, on a personal level, and analyzing their body language and fixing and helping them avoid game time anxiety, in the game anxiety, meltdowns, just connecting with players and their mental psyche, I think would have, in my opinion, would have been a huge, huge help.
Oh, yeah. And going off of that, a cool story about Kobe Bryant. I love, like, anything on Kobe, I love because he's the Mamba mentality and everything. The more you learn about him, he told a cool story when he was first into the league. Tex Winters was there with him, and Tex pulls him in, and he's like, man, it's like going into a room with Yoda. Like, you know, like you if you can picture Tex Winters, little old gray guy, and he took him into a room, and this was before DVDs. This is like late 90s. You know, Ben probably had a mullet and long hair, dragon. No, just kidding.
That was Andy.
That was Andy. Got my brothers mixed
Listen
up.
to a 90s hair metal, yeah.
But he said he pulled him into a room and he popped on a tape, and it was the arena cut of the film. It wasn't the game film. You know, now we can watch individual clips on Huddle and all, you know, it's streamlined that way. But it was the arena cut, so it's like clear up from up top. And they're watching. They watch everything Kobe did, from warm-ups, everything he did, his body language, and he's like, Tex Winters just sit and picked me apart. Why are you doing that? Why are you acting like that? Why are you sulking? Why are you, well, you know? And it just, and this is when he's first in the league, 18, 19 years old, and he's like, man, I had never thought about these things once in my life until he, you know, we didn't analyze the game. We analyzed body language. We analyzed how he interacted with his teammates. We analyzed what he looked like on the bench when he got subbed out, all those messages that he was sending, and they just broke that down. And I'm like, that's a pretty cool story that at that level, at Kobe's level, you know, a coach thought to, hey, I don't need to break down your jump shot. Like, let's get you right mentally.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've talked about this a couple weeks ago, but went back and watching The Last Dance again.
Oh, yeah.
And I was watching the episode the other night when Jordan got in a fight with Steve Kerr. But he was talking about how they were in practice and how Jordan was, you know, he was kind of leading. This is when he came back the second time. And he was talking to Phil, and Phil, they were pushing their guys in practice. And that's when Steve got really heated because he had went to him and said, how am I going to know how these guys are going to react when we play Indiana and the Knicks and it's heated and we're in the Garden unless I push those guys to the limit mentally in practice? Yeah. So I think it's the same thing. It's all these things that go on behind the scenes. It's not just, oh, what am I going to do on game day? It's how have I mentally prepared to be in that situation before I'm in that situation?
Yeah, and I do a visualization technique with athletes. It's called BALL. Breathing, affirmation, look back, look forward. And a lot of that is preparing you for these situations that are to come. Like if I always say everything happens twice, you know, first in your mind, and then you play it out physically. You play it out on the stage. If you haven't thought about that before you're onto the floor, you're experiencing it for the first time. You know,
Good point, yeah.
If you haven't sat down and thought, how am I going to respond to adversity? How am I going to respond to a bad call? How am I going to, you know, these are all things that I'm like, man, where was I when I was a kid? Like, you know, like where were these things that I needed? Because I remember I was a fiery competitor and I didn't think about what am I going to do when there's a bad call? I never thought about that, you know, and that's stuff that I don't think you really think about until it's brought to your awareness. And your breathing, you know, that's another thing. When you talk about pregame anxiety or pregame stress, when kids are nervous and kids are anxious before a game, what's their breathing like? They're usually short, shallow breaths, and their heart rate's pounding. What if you learn to breathe and we practice box breathing. You learn to breathe and you calm yourself back down. Like, that's the one thing that you have total control of at any given moment is your breathing. Like, you can't control my breathing. I can control my breathing. I can ramp myself up. I can bring myself down. I can get myself neutral. But breathing's a skill, just like shooting free throws is a skill. If you practice it, you can master it and you can use it when you need it.
That's why this conversation is so fascinating to me. I'm just thinking of all these things that are so valuable, because in a let's just speak of a high school game. High school game is 32 minutes long. That's not much time.
Yeah.
And the margin of error is so razor thin.
Oh yeah.
When you get good equal teams, I mean, it comes down to a possession.
Yep.
So any little bit that kids can help themselves from a 4-minute meltdown or a 2-minute meltdown or a whole quarter or half meltdown, that much more valuable they are to their team. And then I started thinking, okay, we're asking kids to do this kind of stuff. What responsibility do coaches have to be prepared for these kind of things and be able to help their athletes with this kind of stuff? Because there's a whole lot going on. In 32 minutes, basketball's fast.
Yep.
It's going quick and not always. Like I said, if I had to do it all over again, I would spend the bulk of my time focusing on this stuff because I think it's so key. Just as a practical nature, we're coming to the end of the season here. It's this is the last week.
Yeah, last week.
This is our last week, and then we got play-in games, and then we got the state tournament. What's a couple things that athletes can do in the moment now without any help from mom, dad, or coaches that can help them with anxiety and stress during the playoff time?
Yeah, like I said, a lot of that ball method, learning how to control your breathing, and that's like a simple breathing exercise, box breathing, 4 seconds in. And I do this with kids as young as kindergarten age. It's like 4 seconds in, you're smelling the roses for 4 seconds, you're holding it, and then you're blowing the candles out for 4 seconds. And I work, like I mentioned, I work with the Juab wrestlers, and we do that every night. That's part of their homework every night is to do box breathing, learn to control that breath. When you get into tournament play, a lot of that, is enjoying the moment and being grateful, like I mentioned earlier, being grateful for that opportunity. We put a lot of stress on ourselves. Kids are, being put into younger and younger age. We're putting them into more stressful situations and then asking them to handle it, deal with it, But if we equip them with the tools to know how to do that, and I want to tell a quick story. As you were saying that we expect athletes to have these skills, but coaches also need these skills. My senior year, we were in a battle with Richfield in the semis, and I don't know if you guys remember this game. We jumped out to a huge lead, and then we went to the concession stand for 2 quarters. I think we scored 6 points in the second and third quarter. And they, took a huge lead. Coach Jacobson called a timeout. And I'll never forget that. We were down, I believe it was 43-29. And there was 3:59 on the clock. And Coach Jacobson called a timeout. And he sits us down, and we're sitting there, and we were a group of seniors. We had been through a lot together. And he easily could have came into that huddle and ripped us. What are you doing?
That would have been really fun as a coach sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just sometimes you need that, but his mental maturity at that time as a coach was he was prepared for that moment. And he sat down and he smiled at us. I'll never forget it. He smiled at us and he looked at us and he was like, "We're going to win this game." And he smiled and he left the huddle. There was no X's and O's. There was no, hey, like, we got to do this. We got to do this. He instilled confidence in us. He walked in, he smiled, and we could read his body language. If he would have came in and he was biting his nails, doing all the nervous, jittery stuff, that would have mirrored onto us. But he came in, he was confident. So we're going to win this game. Long story short, we win the game. We come back, epic comeback, hit a free throw with 3 seconds left, advance to the state finals the next night. We don't need to talk about the next night, but but that was something to me that I always lean on when thinking about the tournament. Being grateful for those opportunities, being grateful, having trust. Like, you can't build confidence and trust is built leading up to the tournament. And when you get there, everything that you've instilled into your kids, into your players, that's when it's time to shine. But thinking back, a kid that's listening to this right now, preparing for the state tournament, breathing, affirmations. Affirmations are, I control this situation. I control what I control. Thinking about all the things that are within your control. I don't control what the ref might call. I don't control how loud the crowd is. I don't control the weather. Like, all these things that we find stress by putting stress on ourselves with, a lot of those things are out of our control. Control what you control. Look back on the success that you've had this season. Emotions are a powerful tool, and you can tap into those emotions. If you had a game winner, or you can anchor those moments in time and recall them. I like to use the Netflix analogy. Like, when we turn on Netflix, we turn on our favorite show. Oh, we feel good. That's how our emotions are. Like, we can recall those emotions and go back to those emotions, and then look forward to the thing. Like I said, everything happens twice. You make that, you play it out in your mind. How am I going to respond? What's it going to look like in the Sevier Valley Center when I walk in? Hey, what's it going to smell like? What's it going, like, you create that vision in your head as 3D as possible. And then when it happens, it's nothing new. You've been there before.
Love it.
When you're Jaden Black and you step up to the free throw line with all the pressure of everything going on, and it was like nothing was in the gym.
No,
that was a special moment.
That was a special moment. Yep.
If you would, Shane, tell our audience where they can find you, how they can find you, your social media call outs. What do you got?
Yeah. Everything, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can find me at WASPFIT. We can link that up in the show notes or after. But I'm pretty accessible that way. My gym's located in Nephi. But like I said, I work with athletes. I started out working with Jacko, honestly. Like, he was really my first kid outside of the confines of Nephi. And I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity. And I started working with him, and worked with kids up in Roosevelt, Brooklyn.
Oh yeah,
Brooke. Worked with her. She was faithful, consistent. I worked with a lot of kids in Blanding. I work with a lot of kids in a girl in Kanab, Izzy. Her team, I told her I'd give her a shout out. Her team just won the big tournament yesterday. So, but these are all young kids that are getting, they're making training a priority at a young age. They're priming the pump. They're wiring the house so that when they do get their opportunity to shine, it's nothing new.
So you have the ability to, as far as your training and expertise, you share with individual athletes, and you also have programs like, for instance, with coaches and teams as well.
Yeah, you bet. Like I said, worked with San Juan last year. Worked with several other teams on different bases, whether that's be through strength or whether that be through the mental programs that I do. Right now I'm running a program called AMP, where we do a weekly Zoom call, and then they have weekly follow-ups that they have to do. And a lot of stuff with working with athletes is, like I said, just making them aware. like a lot of the things, like you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it.
The other thought that I had is in visiting with you over the years is that as a basketball coach, your time is very limited. And so you're always worried about the game you just played, the next game you have, practice plan for that night, and really strength training, mental training. That's definitely stuff that goes further down the rung. I mean, further lower down on the levels of time spent on it. So like I said, for coaches out there, this is something that could be a huge benefit for your team because you don't have time to do it. Outsource it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had to do that with coaches, and because like I said, I'm son of a coach. I know how limited your time is, and so it's something that it's important and it's vital. And I remember I had a coach a long time ago tell me, "You've got to do this to compete." That was a long time ago. No longer do you just have to do it to compete. You got to do it to stay in the game, mental and physical. So,
and before we leave, I appreciate you bringing up the fact that the time you spent with Jackson, and in just that small little capsule of time with him, I saw him not only from the surface get stronger physically, but mentally, and his confidence went through the roof. And I will forever take that snapshot of him and credit you with that. But that can be a huge asset to any athlete and coach out there. Amazing things happen when kids have confidence.
Oh, yeah.
When they have strength and confidence. So I will always be thankful to you for that.
Oh, thanks for giving me that opportunity. That was a special time in my life. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. This has been great. I learned a lot of thinking a lot of things that I can do for my 12-year-old. He has a slight meltdown every basketball game, and he's learning how to calm himself down. But even on Saturday, it was like, how do I don't know what to do to help him. And I think we're going to get in touch with you and see what we can start to do now before he's a freshman and he's still trying to figure these things out. So great things that are going on at JUAB High School. Their programs are top notch right now. I know they're well respected throughout the state. So we appreciate everything you're doing and for coming on tonight. Again, for all of our listeners, we'll put something up on the website.
Absolutely,
put something out there so they can get a hold of you. Nephi's not that far away from anywhere.
No, not at all. We're central. That's the nice thing.
Centrally located anymore. It's easy to get there. So as we close tonight, we appreciate your time. We appreciate everybody joining us. So for the coach, Benny Hill, for WASPFIT, Shane Blackett, I'm your host, Andy Hill, and we're out.
Thank you for spending your time with the Fourth Row. For more information, check out our website at fourthrowmedia.com or send us a message through any of our social media channels.